Before we dive into what I'm about to reveal, I need to tell you about something launching on December 11th that will fundamentally alter the trajectory of your life. I've spent the last 8 months developing an exclusive project for members of this channel, a comprehensive system that goes beyond anything I've shared publicly. This isn't another course. This isn't more information. This is a complete operational framework that the top 1% have been using quietly for decades to bend reality to their will, while everyone else struggles with manifestation techniques that were designed to keep you spinning in circles. On December 11th, members will get first access to this transformative project, and I'll be sharing implementation updates exclusively through the Community Posts tab. If what you're about to discover resonates, if you feel that pull toward finally understanding how reality actually operates beneath the surface narrative, become a member now. The link is in the description, because what's launching on the 11th will only make sense if you understand what I'm about to share. Now, let's begin. There's a specific moment that happens in every billionaire's morning routine that you've never heard about. It's not meditation. It's not visualization. It's not affirmations or cold plunges or any of the productivity theater they perform for podcasts and biographies. It's a 90-second practice that separates those who shape reality from those who react to it. And the reason you've never heard about it is because the moment you understand what they're actually doing, the entire structure of how you've been taught to think, to set goals, to create your reality, reveals itself as an elaborate control mechanism designed to keep you exactly where you are. I discovered this by accident 3 years ago while consulting for a private equity firm. I was there to analyze decision-making patterns among their most successful portfolio company CEOs. What I found wasn't better decision-making. It was something far stranger. These individuals, people controlling billions in assets, people whose choices shaped markets and industries, they weren't making decisions the way I'd been taught decision-making works. They weren't weighing options. They weren't analyzing data more effectively. They were doing something that looked, from the outside, like they were just sitting quietly for 90 seconds before any major decision. When I asked one of them, a man who'd built and sold 3 companies for a combined $2.4 billion, what he was doing during those 90 seconds, his answer made no sense. He said, "I'm letting the thoughts clear, so I can hear what wants to happen." I pushed for clarification. Surely he meant he was clearing his mind to think more clearly. He looked at me like I'd missed something obvious. No, thinking is the problem. I'm waiting for the thoughts that aren't mine to pass so I can access the signal underneath. That conversation sent me down a research path that connected neuroscience, quantum field theory, information theory, and something that Silicon Valley's most successful founders won't discuss publicly. The recognition that most thoughts you experience aren't generated by you. They're received by you from a probability field that's being intentionally shaped by those who understand how consciousness actually interfaces with reality. The transmission you've been receiving. Right now, as you read this, you're experiencing thoughts. They're appearing in your awareness, fully formed. You didn't consciously construct them. You didn't choose the specific words, the tone, the associations they're making. They're just arising, one after another, creating what feels like your internal monologue, your perspective, your understanding of reality. Here's the question nobody asks. If you're not consciously generating these thoughts, where are they coming from? The standard answer is that they're produced by your brain, unconscious processing bubbling up into conscious awareness. But that explanation falls apart when you examine what neuroscience has actually discovered about the relationship between consciousness and neural activity. Studies using fMRI and EEG show that conscious awareness of a thought occurs 300 to 500 milliseconds after the brain activity associated with that thought has already begun. You're not generating thoughts, you're receiving a broadcast of neural activity that's already happened. But here's where it gets significantly more interesting. That neural activity isn't random. It's not just your brain spontaneously firing. Your brain is a receiver, an antenna tuned to specific frequencies in what physicists call the quantum information field. And just like a radio receives whatever signal it's tuned to, your brain receives thought patterns based on the frequency it's calibrated to access. The 1% didn't discover this through spiritual practice or ancient wisdom. They discovered it through information theory and pattern recognition. In the 1960s and 70s, certain research groups, funded privately and kept far from public disclosure, began studying how information propagates through populations. They weren't studying communication, they were studying thought contagion. how specific ideas would appear simultaneously in minds across geographic distances, how certain thought patterns would spread through populations faster than any communication network could explain. What they discovered was disturbing and immediately classified. Thoughts propagate through a field. Human consciousness isn't isolated in individual brains. It's networked through quantum entanglement at the neurological level. Your brain is constantly receiving thought patterns from this field, and most of what you experience as your thinking is actually you tuning into broadcasts that are being transmitted by sources you're completely unaware of. The research was classified because the implications were too dangerous for public knowledge. If thoughts aren't individually generated, if they're received from a field that can be influenced, then whoever controls the strongest transmitters in that field controls what billions of people think, without those people ever realizing their thoughts aren't their own. The architecture of mental occupation. Let me show you exactly how this works so you can verify it in your direct experience. For the next 60 seconds, I want you to try something. Stop reading and attempt to have zero thoughts about money. No thoughts about what you have, what you need, what you want, what you're worried about financially. Complete mental silence on the topic of money for 1 minute. Try it now before continuing. What happened? If you're honest, within seconds, thoughts about money appeared. Maybe your current financial situation. Maybe something you need to pay for. Maybe a fleeting anxiety about the future. These thoughts appeared despite your explicit intention not to have them. You couldn't control their appearance. Now here's the critical question. If those thoughts appeared against your will, bypassing your conscious control, where did they come from? The obvious answer seems to be your unconscious mind, processing concerns about survival and resources. But watch what happens when you examine the content of those thoughts. They're not just about survival. They're structured in very specific ways. Thoughts about scarcity, thoughts about needing more, thoughts about comparison with others, thoughts about your worth being tied to your financial status. These aren't random unconscious concerns. These are precisely structured thought patterns that serve a very specific function. They keep you in a state of perpetual seeking, perpetual inadequacy, perpetual focus on lack. And that state of consciousness makes you predictable, controllable, and most importantly, unable to access the frequency where reality actually becomes malleable. Here's what the research groups discovered in those classified studies. Human consciousness operates like a receiver with different frequency bands. Most people are locked into what they called the survival frequency, a narrow band of consciousness dominated by thoughts about scarcity, threat, comparison, and self-preservation. When your consciousness is tuned to this frequency, you receive thought patterns that reinforce this state. Anxious thoughts about the future, regretful thoughts about the past, comparative thoughts about others, self-critical thoughts about your inadequacy. But here's the mechanism that changes everything. These thought patterns aren't just reflections of your circumstances. They're actively creating your circumstances by determining which probability waves collapse into your experienced reality. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in superposition, all possible states simultaneously, until observation occurs. The act of observation collapses the probability wave into one specific state. This isn't mysticism. This is verified, repeatable physics. What the classified research discovered is that this same mechanism operates at the macro scale of your lived experience. Your consciousness is constantly performing observations that collapse probability into actualized reality. But what you're observing is determined by which frequency band you're tuned to, which is determined by which thought patterns you're receiving and identifying with. When you're receiving and identifying with survival frequency thoughts about lack, scarcity, threat, inadequacy, you're performing observations from that state, and reality collapses into the probability distribution that matches those observations. You notice opportunities that confirm scarcity. You experience situations that validate inadequacy. You attract circumstances that reinforce the need for self-preservation. The 1% discovered something that sounds almost too simple to be true. The moment you stop identifying with the thought patterns you're receiving on the survival frequency, the moment you recognize those thoughts aren't yours and consciously tune to a different frequency, reality has to reorganize itself around the new observations you're performing from that shifted state. The frequency separation protocol. That CEO I mentioned, the one who built and sold 3 companies for $2.4 billion, he wasn't special. He wasn't more talented or more intelligent than hundreds of other entrepreneurs I've studied. The only difference was that someone had shown him the frequency separation protocol when he was 27 years old, and he'd been practicing it daily for 18 years. Here's exactly what he does, what all of them do, though they'll never say it this explicitly in public. Every morning, before any decision, any meeting, any significant action, he sits for 90 seconds and performs a very specific internal process. He lets thoughts arise without engaging them. Planning thoughts, worry thoughts, analytical thoughts, strategic thoughts. He doesn't fight them. He doesn't try to stop them. He just recognizes them as transmissions he's receiving, not as his own original thinking. Then he does something most people never learn to do. He asks a question that shifts his receiver to a different frequency. What wants to happen here that I'm not thinking? This question is precisely calibrated. It's not what should I do. That keeps you in thinking, in analyzing, in the survival frequency. It's not what do I want to happen. That keeps you in desire, in lack, in the frequency of not having. It's what wants to happen that I'm not thinking. This question bypasses thought entirely and tunes your consciousness to what they call the emergence frequency, the band where reality's next moves are already forming before they manifest physically. What happens in the 60 seconds after asking that question is something you can verify yourself, but it will sound absurd until you experience it. Information appears in consciousness that isn't structured like thought. It's not verbal. It's not analytical. It's more like a complete knowing of what action to take, what to say, where to move, what to create. And this information has a different quality than thought-based decision-making. It feels inevitable rather than chosen, obvious rather than figured out. When he takes action from this emergence frequency information, reality responds differently. Synchronicities appear. The right people show up. Resources materialize. Obstacles that would have been massive from the survival frequency simply aren't there. Not because he's lucky, because he's collapsed probability from a different frequency band where those obstacles exist in different probability distributions. I've watched this pattern repeat across 40+ individuals controlling a combined $50+ billion in assets. They're not smarter. They're not more disciplined. They're not working harder. They've simply discovered how to stop identifying with survival frequency thought patterns and tune to the emergence frequency where reality is fluid, responsive, and organized around coherent intention rather than fear-based striving. The colonization of your consciousness. Now, I need to show you something darker, something that explains why most people never discover this frequency shift. Because it's not accidental that you've been conditioned to identify with thought patterns that keep you locked in survival frequency. It's deliberate architecture. In the 1950s, when television became widespread, something unexpected happened in the classified research programs. They discovered that broadcast media wasn't just transmitting information to passive audiences. It was training neural patterns. The specific frequency of television broadcasts, the flicker rate, the content structure. It was calibrating millions of brains to receive and identify with specific thought patterns. This wasn't conspiracy. This was optimization. Advertisers needed predictable behavior. Governments needed manageable populations. Economic systems needed consumers who would perpetually seek without ever arriving. And the most effective way to create this wasn't through force or propaganda. It was through thought pattern transmission that people would experience as their own organic thinking. They discovered that human brains entrained to media consumption would begin generating thought patterns that matched the frequency of the content they consumed. Watch news focused on threat and danger. Your brain starts spontaneously generating anxious thoughts about potential threats. Consume content about inadequacy and self-improvement. Your brain generates thoughts about what's wrong with you that needs fixing. Engage with comparison-based social content. Your brain produces thoughts comparing you unfavorably to others. The mechanism is called neural entrainment, and it's not theory, it's measurable. Your brain waves synchronize with the dominant frequencies you're exposed to. And once synchronized, you begin receiving thought patterns from that frequency band as if they're your own original thoughts. Here's why this matters for your actual life right now. Every platform you use, every feed you scroll, every recommendation algorithm you engage with, they're not just showing you content. They're calibrating what frequency your consciousness tunes to. And the frequency they're optimizing for isn't the emergence frequency where reality is fluid and responsive. They're optimizing for survival frequency, where you're anxious, seeking, comparing, consuming. Because people in survival frequency are predictable. They click on threat-based headlines. They purchase solutions to manufactured inadequacies. They stay engaged with content that triggers comparison and anxiety. They're economic value generators who believe their anxious, inadequate, comparative thoughts are their own authentic concerns, rather than received transmissions from a system optimized to keep them in that state. The 1% discovered this not through conspiracy theories, but through simple observation. The majority of the population is receiving and identifying with thought patterns that keep them economically productive and behaviorally predictable, while preventing them from accessing the frequency band where reality actually reorganizes around intention. And the moment you see this mechanism clearly, the moment you recognize that 80% of what you think are your thoughts are actually received transmissions from systems designed to keep you in survival frequency, everything inverts. The 72-hour frequency reset. I'm going to give you a protocol that will prove everything I've described in your direct experience. Not theory, not belief, direct verification. But I need to warn you, this protocol will be uncomfortable because it requires temporarily disconnecting from the transmission systems you've been entrained to. For 72 hours, you're going to perform a complete frequency reset. Here's exactly what that means. Hour 0 to 24, transmission silence. No phone except for essential calls you initiate. No social media, no news, no podcasts, no YouTube except this video, no music with lyrics. You're cutting off the external transmission systems that have been calibrating your neural frequency. During this first 24 hours, you're going to experience something that most people interpret as boredom or anxiety. Thoughts will arise with unusual intensity, restless urges to check your phone, anxious thoughts about what you're missing, compulsive desires to fill the silence with input. Don't fight these, just observe them. Every single thought or urge that arises, label it received transmission, because that's what it is. Your brain has been entrained to specific frequency bands through constant input. And now that the input is cut off, you're experiencing withdrawal from the thought patterns you've been receiving and identifying as you. Hour 24 to 48. Frequency identification. By hour 24, if you've maintained transmission silence, something shifts. The compulsive thought patterns start to quiet. You begin noticing space between thoughts. And in that space, you can start to distinguish between two very different types of mental activity. Type 1. Received thoughts. These arrive fully formed, verbal, often anxious or comparative or analytical. They have a quality of appearing in your awareness rather than being generated by you. They're the survival frequency transmissions you've been identifying with. Type 2, emergence information. This is subtle at first. It's not verbal. It's more like a gentle knowing, an intuitive sense of what wants to happen. It doesn't argue with itself. It doesn't analyze options. It just knows. Your job during hours 24 to 48 is to document every instance where you notice emergence information appearing. Write down what it was about, what it suggested, how it felt different from thought-based mental activity. You're training your consciousness to recognize the difference between received transmissions and emergence frequency signals. Hour 48 to 72, frequency anchoring. Now you're going to practice tuning to emergence frequency intentionally. Every 2 hours, sit for 5 minutes and ask the question, what wants to happen next that I'm not thinking? Don't try to answer with thought. Don't analyze. Don't figure out. Just hold the question in awareness and notice what information arises that isn't verbal, isn't analytical, isn't thought-structured. Then, and this is critical, take one action based on that emergence information. Even if it seems trivial, even if it doesn't make logical sense, even if your thought-based mind argues against it. The action can be as simple as calling someone who appeared in your awareness, or walking in a different direction than planned, or saying yes to something you'd normally decline. You're training your consciousness to trust and act from emergence frequency rather than from survival frequency thought patterns, and reality responds to this shift immediately. I've had people complete this 72-hour protocol and report experiences that sound impossible until you understand the mechanism. One woman, a marketing executive who'd been stuck in the same income bracket for 6 years, did this protocol. During hour 52, she got clear emergence information to email a former colleague she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. No logical reason, just a clear knowing to reach out. She sent the email. Within 4 hours, the colleague responded saying she'd just been thinking about her because a position had opened at a company that was perfect for her skill set. But they weren't advertising it publicly yet. She interviewed. She got the position. Her income increased by 180%. The entire chain of events happened within 11 days of completing the protocol. This isn't manifestation magic. This is what happens when you stop collapsing probability from survival frequency thought patterns and start collapsing from emergence frequency information. The position wasn't created by her shift. It already existed in the probability field. But from survival frequency, tuned to anxious thoughts about career stagnation, she couldn't perceive it. From emergence frequency, the information about how to access it appeared clearly and immediately. The pattern recognition that changes everything. Once you complete the 72-hour reset and you've experienced the difference between received thought patterns and emergence frequency information, you gain the ability to recognize which frequency you're operating from moment to moment. And this recognition is the skill that separates those who shape reality from those who react to it. Here's how to verify which frequency you're tuned to at any moment. Survival frequency indicators. Thoughts are verbal, analytical, comparative. Mental activity feels like work, like effort. You're planning, strategizing, figuring out. There's underlying anxiety even when thoughts seem positive. You're seeking information externally to make decisions. Actions feel like pushing against resistance. Emergence frequency indicators. Information appears as complete knowing rather than verbal thought. Mental activity feels effortless, spacious. You're not planning, you're seeing what's already forming. There's underlying calm, even when addressing challenges. Knowing arises internally without needing external validation. Actions feel like moving with momentum that's already building. The 1% have trained themselves to notice the moment they slip into survival frequency and immediately reset to emergence frequency. They don't judge it. They don't make it mean anything about themselves. They just recognize, I'm receiving survival frequency transmissions right now, and they use a specific technique to shift. Here's the technique that the CEO taught me, the same one he'd been using for 18 years. The moment you notice you're in survival frequency, identified with anxious or analytical or comparative thought patterns, you do 3 things. 1. Recognize out loud or internally. These are received transmissions, not my knowing. 2. Take 3 slow breaths while releasing identification with the thought content. 3. Ask, what wants to happen here that I'm not thinking, and wait for emergence information. The entire process takes 30 seconds, but it shifts which frequency band you're tuned to, which shifts which probability waves you're collapsing through observation, which shifts what reality presents to you. I've watched people use this technique before major negotiations and close deals they would have lost from survival frequency. I've seen people use it before difficult conversations and have those conversations resolve in ways that seemed impossible. I've experienced it myself before making business decisions that have generated more revenue than the previous 5 years combined. This isn't because the technique manipulates reality. It's because survival frequency observations collapse probability into limitation, resistance, and struggle. Emergence frequency observations collapse probability into flow, alignment, and opportunity. Same reality, different observation point, completely different manifestation. What's actually happening in the field? Let me explain the mechanism in terms that connect quantum physics with your lived experience, because once you understand how this actually works, you'll never relate to your thoughts the same way again. Your brain generates an electromagnetic field that extends approximately 3 meters from your body in all directions. This isn't mysticism. This is measurable with standard EEG and MEG technology. This field carries information about your internal state, your dominant frequency, your moment-to-moment observations. When you're identified with survival frequency thought patterns, your electromagnetic field broadcasts a specific signature. It's chaotic, fluctuating, characterized by high beta brainwave activity. This field signature interacts with the quantum probability field around you, the field of potential that quantum physics describes as containing all possible states simultaneously. Here's the critical part. Your electromagnetic broadcast doesn't create probability. It filters which probabilities collapse into your manifest experience. Think of it like a radio that can only receive signals on certain frequencies. All the frequencies are being broadcast, but you only experience the ones your receiver is tuned to. Survival frequency broadcasts filter for probability states that match survival concerns, threats to be managed, scarcity to be overcome, competition to be won, inadequacy to be fixed. These probabilities exist in the field, but they're not the only probabilities. They're just the ones that collapse into your experience when that's the frequency you're broadcasting from. Emergence frequency broadcasts filter for different probability states, aligned opportunities, synchronistic connections, resources appearing, solutions emerging. These probabilities also exist in the field. They're just invisible from survival frequency because your receiver isn't tuned to detect them. The 1% haven't figured out how to create better probabilities. They've figured out how to tune their receiver to the frequency where the probabilities they want are already available. And they do this by recognizing that survival frequency thought patterns are received, transmissions they don't have to identify with, while emergence frequency information is the signal their authentic consciousness naturally tunes to when not hijacked by received transmissions. The integration protocol. Everything I've shared points to one practice that integrates into a daily rhythm. This is what maintains emergence frequency as your default state rather than survival frequency. This is what the 1% do that looks like nothing from the outside, but changes everything about which probabilities collapse into their experience. Morning calibration, 15 minutes. Before any input, any phone, any external transmission, you sit in silence and perform frequency calibration. Minutes 1 to 5, transmission recognition. Let thoughts arise. Don't fight them. Don't engage them. Just label each one. Receive transmission. You're training your consciousness to stop identifying with thought patterns as you. Minutes 6 to 10, frequency shift. Ask, what wants to happen today that I'm not thinking? Don't answer with thought. Wait for emergence information. It might be subtle at first, just a sense, a direction, a knowing. Trust what appears. Minutes 11 to 15, action identification. Based on emergence information, identify one action to take today. Not a task from your to-do list, not an obligation. One action that emerged from frequency shift, even if it seems small or illogical. Midday reset, 5 minutes. Halfway through your day, you perform a frequency check. Am I operating from survival frequency thought patterns or emergence frequency information? If survival frequency, use the 30-second reset. Recognize transmissions, 3 breaths, ask the question, wait for emergence. Evening documentation, 10 minutes. Before sleep, you document. Moments today when I operated from survival frequency. Moments today when I operated from emergence frequency. What reality presented when I was in each frequency. The action I took from emergence information and what resulted. This daily protocol does something that thought-based practices can never do. It trains your consciousness to default to emergence frequency rather than survival frequency. And as that default shifts, the probabilities that collapse into your manifest reality shift to match. The decision point. Everything in this transmission has been pointing you toward one recognition that you can verify in your direct experience right now. Most of what you think are your thoughts are received transmissions from frequency bands designed to keep you in survival mode, predictable, controllable, and unable to access the emergence frequency where reality actually reorganizes around coherent intention. The 1% don't use manifestation techniques. They don't visualize or affirm or script desired realities. They've discovered something far more fundamental. Reality doesn't respond to what you want or what you think you should have. Reality responds to which frequency you're broadcasting from, which is determined by which thought patterns you're identifying with. When you're identified with survival frequency transmissions, reality has to present struggle, limitation, and resistance because that's what you're observing for through that frequency filter. When you shift to emergence frequency by recognizing survival thoughts aren't yours and tuning to the information underneath, reality presents flow, alignment, and opportunity because that's what you're now observing for through that frequency filter. The 72-hour reset protocol I gave you will prove this in your direct experience. The daily integration protocol will make it permanent. And what's launching for members on December 11th will give you the complete system that maps every area of life, relationships, finance, health, career, creativity, showing you exactly how to identify which frequency you're in, and how to shift to emergence frequency in that specific domain. This isn't more information. This is operational knowledge that changes what's possible in your actual lived experience. The community posts will track the implementation, the results, the refinements. This is what separates those who understand these concepts intellectually from those who integrate them so deeply that reality has no choice but to reorganize around their shifted frequency. Your thoughts aren't yours. They never were. And the moment you stop defending them, stop identifying with them, stop letting received transmissions determine which probabilities collapse into your experience, everything inverts. Reality stops being something you struggle against and becomes something that organizes itself around the coherent signal you're finally broadcasting from emergence frequency. The question isn't whether this is true. You can verify it yourself in 72 hours. The question is whether you'll actually do the protocol or whether you'll let this become another received transmission you file away and forget. Another piece of information that changes nothing because you never moved it from concept to direct experience. Reality is waiting, not for you to figure anything out, not for you to become worthy or ready or healed. Reality is waiting for you to stop identifying with survival frequency transmissions and tune to the emergence frequency that's been available underneath the noise this entire time. The 1% aren't special, they just know what frequency to broadcast from. And on December 11th, members get the complete architecture. Everything shifts from there.